More,
Okay,
but not
Care of a prisoner in
welcome, everybody.
Guantanamo.
This is the
That's what it.
June 8th meeting of the Energy Advisory Committee. And I'll quickly take the roll. Committee member Tom Rooney.
Here.
And committee member Kevin Charette.
Here.
Committee member Ben D'Antonio,
Present.
Counselor Cook,
here.
committee member Peter Somsich,
Here.
and committee member Allison Tanner.
Here.
Great. Okay. Well, we're launched.
Yay.
Yay.
Word.
So I thought I would at least, in thanks to what everybody's done, have a little toast. It's been 18 months, right?
That's true.
And,
That's a big. We want it.
thank you. I don't know what people will think if you watch this video.
Thank you.
And this is non-alcoholic apple cider, so.
Oh, geez. Oh, come on.
I can make believe.
We're in City Hall.
I was just about to say, I heard from somebody recently, I was on a Zoom call with to say, one drink, alcoholic drink will change you immediately. And I said, come on, I live in Europe.
Need more than one.
Well, maybe change for the better. I don't know, but I don't think so. So
Oh, my
now maybe
goodness.
this will change us. For the better.
Not about real shit. But that
Tiny,
need might go on pretty long.
tiny bit. You don't need, that's good. Thank you.
You know, had I known this, I would have brought some Hungarian apricot brandy.
There you
Oh,
go.
now that would have been exciting.
Is that Slivovitz?
Well, that would be with
Thank you.
plum, but Hungarians use apricots, which is much better. I mean, I'm biased towards it, but it's more aromatic,
Uh-huh.
more fruity smelling, and it's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And in Transylvania, the previously Hungarian part of Romania, people there traditionally will have a shot every morning just as a preventive medical procedure. So it seems to work.
Breakfast of
World.
champions.
Kind of like translating.
Cheers, everybody.
Okay,
Thanks for all the
cheers.
good work.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been an awesome committee. Should we get the facts and figures, Kevin?
Facts and figures.
Yeah.
Yes. So, about 12,000 enrolled started enrolling on June 1st. And given the meter reading schedule, this month for Eversource, the vast majority are already enrolled at this point. There's some cats and dogs that will different rates that are kind of onesie twosies over the course of the month, but as of this past Monday, I think 11,000 out of the 12,000 were being enrolled on their meter reading schedule. And we've had about 50 opt-outs out of 12,000.
Less than 0.5%.
Yeah, very tiny. And I think we've had about 70 opt-ups to the greener rates. And another 50 or so opt-ins. Those are largely from folks that were with a competitive supplier.
How many?
50?
50?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looked like just most of them opted into the 33% renewable. Most of the opt-ups seem to go more toward the 100%.
Yep.
And just a reminder, the ones that are not enrolled were the 3,000 or so that are with competitive supplier.
Mhm.
About 150 that are stuck in that net metering issue. That the coalition right now is filing a very substantial complaint, 20-page complaint on that topic and a few others relative mostly to Eversource. And then the largest customers were not automatically enrolled. There's only a handful of them, large commercial and industrial in the city, and they're I think pretty much all with competitive supply already. And then there's a few little rates, backup rate and a commercial and industrial electric vehicle rate that, a few just, again, small numbers, those aren't automatically enrolled. So the big numbers, the 3,000 that are with competitive supply. But we only had 50 opt-outs. And, but we're off and running. And, you know, the statistics, I think we discussed at the information meeting, and they're still kind of holding, is over the first 2 months right now at 15.8 cents, the aggregate savings are north of 800,000 just in rate savings. And then 1.2 million going into the reserve for the first 2 months. Wow. So,
Just for Portsmouth?
yes. So it's, you know, aggregate about 2 million. And a part of that is the fact that there's such a delta between the rate, the 15.8 and the 20 cent. So on a going forward basis, you know, that headroom is gonna, you know, kind of narrow. And so, but that's a good number out of the gate. And
We talked to the Portsmouth Rotary today, and when that number of 800,000 and 2 million of overall benefit in 2 months came out, there was some, you know, gasps and wows, and I mean, it is pretty impressive.
so the rate right now, I mean, you would know better than me, but I saw the schedule, but I don't know if Eversource is already out to bid or they're in the process of being out to bid. But once they settle in, all Eversource and all three utilities settle in on their rate here, and it gets approved by the PUC later this month, then CPCNH will set its rate for effective August 1st, and as well as the contribution to the reserve, and that rate will be announced by July 1st. It has to be 30 days in advance of it being effective. So we'll know the new rates here within about 3 weeks. No later than July 1st. So.
And perhaps a couple quick
Sure.
questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
As I understood it, when we did the initial rate, there was a trade-off between should we have everyone on one consistent rate across the coalition, or should that we try to have the relative savings by area proportional? You know, various members of the coalition got different rates to try to spread out some of the savings. As we go to our second rate, is that going to continue on with a rate that's offered to the various coalition members eventually harmonize, or can you talk about how that?
As far as I understand it, the rates will be the same rates across
Same rate.
the 12 communities.
Okay.
And communities still have the choice of what they want as their default rate, as I understand it. I don't think anybody is contemplating changing so quickly after just launching.
Sure.
But only one community has, Hanover has the 33% as their default rate. But all the other 11 communities are with the Granite Basic. But yes, it's one package of rates.
Okay.
So you're not at a point yet where, you know, when the reserves build up to a certain point and communities have what discretionary reserves, because initially it's all joint reserves, everybody's, because they're trying to just build up to get coverage to have financial stability for the coalition initially. But once, say Portsmouth has discretionary monies in their pot, those monies could be used toward adjusting rates, rate relief in a period where, you know, the community would think it would be necessary, but not, you know, we're a ways away from that concept. Yeah.
And on the suit around net metering, do you know what the relief that they're asking for is?
They're pretty much just laying out. I just saw a draft of the complaint a couple days ago from Clifton. And he's like an encyclopedia or everything that's happened in deregulation since 1998. And that the utility should have addressed this, in April of, 1998. So he has kind of laid this out in detail that the utilities, and it's not just Eversource, but the other three are kind of a barrier to the competitive market working properly in terms of them supporting not only net metered, but time of use rates as well. And that's kind of a lesser issue right now for communities, or it's really the net metered. But so they've laid it out. Supposedly there's some talk of a working group among the EDI working group for the utilities coming together to kind of freshen up the rules around EDI, because this is really an EDI issue in terms of how data transfers
What's
back
EDI?
and forth. Pardon?
What's ED?
Electric data interchange. So it's the utilities being able to provide the community power aggregations information around what was exported to the grid, et cetera, and they're not set up to do that. But apparently there's been some talk for a while, not just around that metering, about though that the utilities in the state were going to be convening to freshen up the EDI rules. There's always been a working group of supporting EDI, and the competitive suppliers have been part of that working group, the utilities and the PUC, et cetera. And I think Clifton thinks that the PUC might punt this issue to that working group to resolve it. So they've more or less just laid out their complaint over 20 to 30 pages. And it's going to the PUC and to the what's the other new agency, the Department of Energy, yeah. And I guess they have some overlapping authorities, and they're trying to get that in by this Friday.
Okay.
So I don't think they know how it's going to get resolved. They've also made a complaint that the utilities, what they think at the 11th hour, saying that the coalition couldn't be a supplier.
Third party.
They're basically right. They were going to kind of identify as a supplier. And changing that at the 11th hour caused the coalition to move back its implementation by about a month. And in doing so, the combined initial 10 communities lost about $4 million really in reserve accumulation. So they're kind of laying that issue out as well, that the utilities were well aware of what the coalition was wanting to do, and they've cited all the communications back into last fall with the utilities around this topic. And that some of this came out in the 11th hour. So it's just Clifton's first draft is out, and it's with the attorneys right now to kind of massage, and they're looking to try to get it in by this Friday.
We
We'll
have
see where it goes.
150 net metered customers in Portsmouth.
150.
Yeah. And not all of those put power back into the grid.
Right.
Some just lower their bill. Those folks are still eligible.
They are. Yeah.
It's just the electronic data interchange for people who produce more power than they use.
So I think when the dust settles, the coalition might do more outreach to those net metered customers that never export, to
Right.
talk to them about even while this issue still isn't resolved. But they didn't want to muddy the water going live in terms of the different flavors of net metering. So it was just, they were all not enrolled. And if they thought they potentially could, they were directed through the FAQs that we had to call the call center and talk about their individual circumstance. And there might have been some customers in different communities that have enrolled. I don't know.
I think one of the things I'm happy about is that we'd heard, as we all know, that Eversource wanted to tag every town or city with a number, so that if any town ever exited, they'd have a discrete data
Subset.
list of billing customers. And because we filed everything promptly, thank you, Peter. With the PUC and with Eversource, they were ready well in advance. They reconfigured the database with our town identifier, I think on a Sunday, 3 weeks before we were ready to go. So everything was ready. They tested the transfer of billing data. So we should be all set to have the bills rolled out. Oh, great. And the mystery to me is how high is our public level of awareness?
Mhm.
I just don't know. I mean, maybe you guys have heard. I think the written material we sent out was great. And at Rotary today, there was a pretty high level of awareness. But I think that's, that's folks who are engaged in the community, have businesses here, an apartment dweller over in the West End who's
Mhm.
35 years old. How aware is that person? It's hard to know.
Well, and I think that there's also the level of, do they really care? There's going to be a group of people that as long as they're getting their power on a regular basis, they're really not going to be paying much attention to supplier. I'm fascinated by this 3,000 that have alternative suppliers because I'm one of them. And the reason I'm still one of them is that I signed a 1-year contract when the rates went up last year in August. So I'm kind of wondering how many of those folks who are very aware of supply are in a 1-year contract like me because of the rates last year and will soon join. Or
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked to some people today. And it's
Mhm.
just waiting for my contract to expire.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
And I think, at the 15.8 versus 20, some people might start to notice their bills a little lower when this first one comes out. But I also think that we're probably going to come down off of 15.8 as of August 1. So, and the utilities are going to come down as well. But now that we have them in the coalition and they're at 15.8 and they go, oh, the utility was at 22, and now 2 months in, it becomes something less than 15.8. It becomes kind of a good story that they're in a short period of time, they've done 2 steps down as a result of being part of the coalition. We can't really take credit for what the markets are doing, and people won't really pay attention necessarily to what Eversource's rate is once they're part of the coalition. Some will keep an eye on it, but so hopefully the rate will come down lower than 15.8 when we reset for August 1st, which will just continue to be a good story.
I think there are communities that are inherently kind of vulnerable, or not vulnerable, but would be attracted to the options we offer. And I'm thinking of churches. In my particular case, I'm a trustee with the South Church, and I've been badgering them for over a year now. I said, you guys still have, we're claim we're a green sanctuary, but we still have pretty much traditional fossil fuel energy coming into this church. And when are we going to change? And they all think it's too complicated. We don't understand all that stuff with third parties and whatever. But I think most churches, if they were made aware that this is an option they have, and nonprofits who want to show that they want green energy, I think those are prime targets for a little bit of persuasion.
Yeah.
And
they would be opted in now, like the church would be.
If they were with Eversource.
but the churches are considered a small business.
Yeah, but if they were with Eversource, they would have been
Yeah.
enrolled.
They'd be ours now.
There's all the small business,
But they're not even,
Yeah.
they're in Eversource, but they're getting the traditional rate that
They're in the
everyone,
Coalition now.
they would,
but they would not be automatically opted in, would they?
if they're small commercial, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I will see because I'm
All
getting their
residential.
bills every month. So far, I haven't seen a bill with us on it,
Yeah, you won't see, the bills will start coming out,
July or,
July 1-ish.
Okay, so-
And out.
so I will look for that. But, just to your point that, people's, or John's point, actually, that, some people, are more aware of what exactly is going on and others are not. And some just think it's too complicated. And they just don't want to rock the boat. They like things to be stable. And I think once they see that our community power effort is no big deal for them, then they'll start thinking more about, well, maybe I want more green power,
And
I
in
have
a
some
few-
options.
In a few weeks, we'll know, like right now, all of the options are below the Eversource
Yep.
rate, right? So
Yep.
it's, the story's
Yep.
kind of easy. But once we know what the other rates are, will they still be below Eversource? I
Right.
think we'll know and can better craft what
Yep.
our communications are, if maybe the 33 is still below whatever Source has, but the other two are above. I
Yep.
think that changes our marketing a little bit.
Yeah. But I
Well,
mean,
we'll know that in
I'm
a
saying
few
these
weeks.
organizations would probably pay a little more to have that moniker that they're getting green energy,
Right. Right.
even then. So I think, and then another thing I was going to ask you about is, this issue of rec sweeping. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not-
So, okay, so let's say if you
Probably no.
have a solar installation and you've registered it with the PUC because you need to in order to get the credits that come to you. But if you decide, not the credits, but the subsidy, if I might say, if you don't sell your RECs on the market, but you're registered in the PUC's database as having a solar collector, the current or previous, I don't think it's changed, but I believe the current procedure is that your utility can say, we want to claim that energy as being renewable to satisfy the renewable portfolio standard. So what I'm saying is if we're like a third party, do we get any kind of credit for somebody in Portsmouth who might not be selling RECs, but has a renewable energy generation? Or does that get retained by the previous utility?
Yep.
I don't know.
Question, I don't know.
My recollection of the issue from the documents is the latter.
That the utility retains that.
I've heard that before too, that you don't, but I've heard people don't want to sell their RECs because they want to have renewable energy, be able to say they have renewable energy on their house if they have solar panels. And if
Yeah.
you sell the RECs, you really can't say that. And they say that they said that to the utility and they said, no, if you don't sell it, we're going to take it.
Well, that's not exactly correct. The way it works is if you can have RECs issued to you for what you generate.
You can
You might not sell them now.
Yeah.
If you don't sell them, you're retiring them,
retire them
nailing them on the wall and you're saying, I'm not going to let anybody use this.
because
But-
they're using it.
But if you don't do that, then the utility will claim it as their renewable energy.
There's a process you have to
So-
follow to retire your RECs.
Yeah, you gotta somehow go through that process in order to protect what some people have said, that's an inherent. I'm doing this and I'm generating this. This is an entity that's obviously fungible in the sense that it can be used in different ways. So how do I retain it? But I don't want to sell it into the market because some people think, okay, if I sell into the market, it will depress the price. I want the price to go up for renewable energy. So, if it's too low. So anyway, there's that thinking.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I don't know how this plays with the community power, whether that is even an issue.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the things that happened in my committee was, so let's say, I think you have solar like I have it. The utility had this kind of a formula to say, okay, you've got, 5,000 watts on your roof. And we're going to say that that's 18% efficient. And we use that 18% to calculate how much is renewable. But that 18% was just something an average they pulled out of somewhere. And my committee, actually, we reduced that to 16 because for most people's product at the time, the efficiency was more like 14. So with 18%, it made it look like it was more renewable energy generated than it actually was. But they didn't have to make any kind of proof about this. This was kind of an aggregate average they could use. So what I'm saying, it's kind of a complicated procedure, but nonetheless, there is value to it because the utility could say, you know, I've got this much renewable energy and some of it is yours, even though you didn't give me permission to use it. I just took it because I can.
That sounds like a PUC issue.
Well, yes, it is, but
Could the coalition?
so I don't know.
I
what
mean,
the-
easy enough to get an answer to that. you
Yeah,
know.
okay.
Clifton would know like that.
Yeah.
And the rationale for doing that is that the utility is required to comply with state law as to what the renewable content is. They
Right.
need to go out and spend money on that.
Yeah.
So that value is captured for ratepayers and it goes to ultimately reduce rates.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I just know
Then that would be consistent with New Hampshire's philosophy.
we had several bills that were nothing else but that people be notified that that's happening to their energy. And that was defeated. We didn't want to notify people about it.
Other coalition headlines, we got a new CEO. who's-
Yep, he's been on board about 3 weeks and really settling in well. It's a quick study. And he's taken the helm and I could see Clifton's focusing a lot more on regulatory matters. That's kind of his kind of sweet spot to begin with. And there's a lot of things that are percolating through Concord. And it's giving him, I think, more time to focus.
Yeah.
the vast majority of his time on regulatory matters, which,
Right.
you know, for the benefit of the coalition, which benefits all of us and
Yep.
on the community side. So it seems like every 2 weeks, he's looking for approval to intervene on another docket.
Yes.
So he has to get approval by the executive committee to do that. No one ever says no to him, but he's got to at least go through the process and
He's the only one that made the entire committee's eyes glaze over every time he
Yeah, yeah.
testified.
Yeah.
This is his fun zone, you know?
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I read his complaint and it was like at the end, I was just. Wow.
I know.
And I said, I can't imagine anybody, reading this up in Concord and, it's all factual and accurate, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, wow.
And it sounds like Dover is sort of reappraising their options and
Yeah, and there's, as much as, I mean, we were advised, the fall was off the calendar.
Can you explain that again, Kevin?
No.
When is the best time to get in? Because I've been asked this a number of times too, that people said, those people are not going now. And I say, well, I think there's a better
There's the
time in
spring,
the year
yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
Can you explain why?
Oh, I'm just trying to rack my brain around now.
Is it because the rates are
A lot of it
changing?
has to do with the market at that point in time going into the winter. And we would not supposedly be able to contribute sufficiently to reserves. And we'd be kind of a free rider to the other communities that have launched at a more opportune
before.
time and were able to. So we could actually be a drag on the coalition's finances for a stretch of time during the winter. So I mean, it was, and I still think it's not an opportune time, but they're revisiting that there may be a sweet spot in the late summer, early fall that Dover perhaps could go live and other communities go live. And some of these towns that are joining and getting their aggregation plan finalized are so tiny that them going live would be like a blip. Some of the
Yeah.
communities in parts of the state.
Yeah.
So I think they're perhaps contemplating that some might be able to go live because they're kind of immaterial,
Mhm.
in the big picture. But they're also saying there might, if things happen, that there's a potential that Dover could go live, but
I-
Regardless, I'm glad.
Yeah,
we
it
went
was
on.
interesting to me that having been unable to pass, they deadlocked 4-4 on their council. Their ninth person wasn't there, so the motion failed to move ahead for June. But it sounds like now they're saying, tugging on the coalition sleeve and saying, we didn't really mean that.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't even have been able to go for June. They would have been July.
Yeah.
So they would have been a 1 month on this rate, and it would have been the month that they were implementing. They at the same time would say, and here's your new rate, August
Yeah.
1st, you know.
I thought that was the main problem, that, you know, if you people sign up, let's say, right before rate changes, then you say, okay, I got this rate. Oh, what do you mean? Next month it's gonna be different? I mean, that gives you a feeling, how often is it gonna change?
Yeah, and they had a faction that was concerned with, they have municipal third-party contracts that expire some point later in the year.
Mhm.
And they thought it wasn't good form to bring, you know, residents and businesses into community power, but say our municipal accounts, we're keeping them where they are. So there was some discussion that they wanted to let those contracts expire and to bring their municipal accounts into community power. And I think there was also, you know, there were some hiccups with the first 10 communities on, you know, some things initially.
Mhm.
And I think they just didn't want to run with scissors. You know, they thought it would be safer just to wait.
Mhm.
But I think there's strong support to join. But there was not strong support to join
Yeah.
for July 1.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, they're gonna do it, it's just.
Yeah. Yeah.
I put on the agenda, you know, I'm just one of the committee here, but I was disappointed that only 70 people opted up. I
Hmm.
thought we'd done a pretty good job messaging. I thought our survey with the 460 responses showed real interest in the 33% and the 50% and the 100%. So, and if you go back to when we set our goals for the aggregation plan, one of the goals was to help us lower our carbon footprint. And certainly, the Sustainability Committee is very supportive of community power for that reason. So that seemed to me a place that we have more work to do.
One thought there is, I would imagine there's 3,000 that are on
Third party.
third party supply. That there's quite a bit of overlap, that people had the foresight to do that are probably a good chunk of the same ones.
Right. They may be our green people.
And I think too, I mean, rates are just so darn high to begin with. I mean, even at 15.8, we haven't been at 15.8 forever,
Mhm.
you know, and we're like, that's a victory for us right now because we're down
Because
to
not
20.
24.
You know, but I mean, rates have historically over the past decade been between like 7 and 11 cents.
Right.
So, you know, even going up to the green rate of 16.2 or 16.9 or the 100% at 19.1 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Those are just ridiculously high prices to be paying right now. And so I think I mean, you may have people that do it just on principle,
Mhm.
but I mean, these are high rates, you know, and I think there's an across the board. You know, we wanting to get the lowest rate possible by most customers right now until maybe rates settle out a little bit. That's just my thinking because there's,
Right.
you know, when you start paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour, it's a lot of money. You know?
Sure.
You know, I think, I mean, I spoke to a friend of mine who got the flyer in the mail. And he's a person I would think that he's pretty astute about these things. Not that he's into energy stuff himself, but I think he does read things carefully. And, but I discovered after talking with him more, he didn't quite understand and feel comfortable with everything. And after our discussion, he said, I'm glad I had this discussion because now a lot of things are clearer to me. So I think the first reading of, there's a lot of information, that flyer,
Yeah.
and it's all there. It's just people have to absorb it. And there's an incubation time in the brain until they say, wait a minute, I think, can I do this? This is interesting, So I think you can't expect spontaneously to people to react to that in a way that we might want them to.
Right.
But I think if they feel comfortable with it after a while, and if then we start making a pitch, well, let's get Portsmouth to be more green. I think once they're comfortable, they will respond. But it's hard to get them to do it immediately, like Kevin's saying. First of all, it's price wise, it's more expensive. And secondly, they're not quite comfortable with all the details yet.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people might be waiting for that, even
No, I think
people who
that's-
are.
I think that's true.
I think we just need a constant drumbeat of communications from different angles around community power and
And that's what I was going to ask, who's keeping track? Does anybody of our committee or the city staff or whatever, are we keeping track of what is our greenhouse gas emissions footprint? What's the percentage of green power versus non-green power? We have to have some place or someone who's putting together this data on a regular basis. So we can show to people, we're at 15% or whatever, we'd like to get to 20%,
Right.
or our greenhouse gas emission is at this level.
Yep.
We'd like to see it reduced by 5% or something within the next year, some kind of goal setting and some kind of documentation of the data.
So right now we have done our greenhouse gas inventory 3 times in the past.
Mhm.
Trying to finalize the 2021, but we're not super confident in what that's going to show because it was such a heavy COVID year.
Yep.
But we're in the middle of a climate action plan, which will have strategies and targets as part of that. And then we'll continue to do our greenhouse gas emissions through the years going forward. So we'll be able to track usage. I don't know if,
Well,
70
that's a
people
great
switching
idea. And
to
I'm thinking
power.
this is an opportunity when we have this data from
Yeah.
Portsmouth, that should merge into what you guys are
well,
doing,
what it's
right?
going to do is, I think it opens up quite a bit what we have access to in the Eversource data, in just the energy
Yeah.
user data,
Yeah.
I guess. Because it was a little more proprietary, and I think
Yeah.
Community Power provided some more information to the communities that joined. So that'll help. That'll help us get more resolution on our greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
And they have a score. CPCNH has a scorecard now.
Oh, they
Town-
do?
Town by
Town
town,
by town?
Oh,
just showing the different rate buckets.
at
brackets.
any,
Do they say how many of that 70, what they opted up to? And is there somewhere you can see that?
Sure.
they have it in my pocket.
Have it in your pocket.
So the 74 went to the 33%, 22 went to the 50, and 44 went to the 100.
So the majority went to.
And the majority of 39 came opted in, and 24, the 39 went to the 33.
Right.
So, but these are tiny numbers, but
mhm.
it's, and at any point in time going forward, kind of on a month-to-month basis, we will know what our profile is of how many customers are still in community
Mhm.
power, how many opted out, how many opted in, what rates they're on. That data is readily available to us.
So when we have new rates in August, people are just gonna find out what the new rate is on their bill?
Yes.
Because what I was thinking is that it might be useful to try to get more people to enroll in renewable power, depending on what the rates are, but I think including the complete breakdown of the greenhouse gases that are emitted at each rate
Mhm.
level would be a good thing to encourage people to sign up for
Yeah.
more renewable.
Yep.
So I think if that's something that we could put in the water bill again, this little chart,
Yep.
asking people to opt up and here's your new rate, that kind of thing.
I absolutely
Or
agree.
a nice little bar chart.
Yep.
That we put into the newsletter as well, with it, an update on community power, how many were enrolled.
Mhm.
Rates are reset. Here's the new rate August 1st. Oh, by the way, to your point, Allison.
Yeah.
And I think we, you know, just continuously look for kind of little good stories to talk about relative to community power and get it into the
Right.
newsletter and other venues on a kind of a steady, you know, it doesn't have to be every week, but at least.
Yeah,
It'd be a way to recognize people that are,
yeah.
going up to a certain level. I don't know what you do. Give 'em a
With
breakdown.
privacy concerns,
Energy champions.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. or-
maybe as an aggregate group
Oh,
or
you know,
something.
You know what would be interesting, is if we had yard signs. That people who opted up to 100%
Oh, that'd be
could have a
great.
little yard sign that they could put in their yard. I have,
Although you have to be careful unless they're with bamboo or something, you don't wanna put.
I know, you gotta be really careful, but,
We know all about signs, yeah.
but it does gets people's attention.
It'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great. And
Yeah.
they'd pop up in various neighborhoods.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. And I like the idea of maybe a little interview with a green energy champion, you know.
Mhm.
This is why I signed up. and-
Kevin, you know, I think I sent you a message and you forwarded it to somebody about the last part of the flyer where it says you get 33%, 50%, 100%. What was missing there, in my opinion, is to say, okay, the regular default rate per kilowatt hour gives you so much carbon. 33% is so much carbon. 100% is zero carbon.
I did that chart for the talk today. I'll
That,
pass that
something
around.
like that as the part of the flyer that we had. And I think I was sent
Yeah,
something
the
like
disclosure statement on the back.
that. Right, with disclosure, that did not contain that.
No.
And
That's
no-
what I was suggesting to. put
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the,
yeah, I get it, yeah.
And I like the idea of,
So that shows people, okay, if I go from one
Means.
category to another, how does that impact? You know, what I'm emitting,
Mhm.
and not only that, but the disclosure forms that all the third parties have to provide also includes like sulfur dioxide, NOx, all those other things as well. And those are also pollutants, okay,
Yeah.
that you'd rather not have in the air if you could avoid it.
so, you know, that was,
Friends, you know, if you
I
wanna
think
see it.
it makes the point that if you went 100% renewable, just one little household in Portsmouth could save almost
Mhm.
6 tons of carbon a year.
Mhm.
That's, you know, and you multiply that by 10,000 households or
Yeah.
thousands of households,
The units,
pounds.
pounds of carbon.
Pounds per megawatt hour.
Did you guys send that out somewhere or where's?
That was just in a talk today, but
Oh,
it
okay.
could be sent out.
Yeah.
I think your chart's more complete.
Yeah.
The one that
You didn't have that from Samuel Golding? He's the one.
I
that-
Yeah,
did,
that's who I talked to.
did, I
was
just-
on it, too.
for simplicity and
Oh.
in front of a group, I.
All you did was carbon.
Yeah. opted.
And what's tricky with Samuel sent me something too, and I wasn't quite clear about how they did it because, you know, you got to standardize, if 100% is zero, then what's 0%? Okay, so really you should start with 0% renewable. What's the 100% fossil fuel? What's that emission? Okay, and then work your way up through the categories. And I think he and I went back and forth to say,
Yeah.
where are we standardizing this to? I mean, are we using the default rate as the?
It's the system mix.
Yeah, I know, but is the Portsmouth, is the community power using the relative to the default rate?
Yeah, it
to-
should be, right?
That's the baseline.
But in fact, it should really be 100% fossil fuel should be. Because you're going from 0% fossil.
Where are we getting?
Well, let's say if I,
That's 100%.
well, no, if I was using coal entirely for energy.
And no one's doing that.
I know, but I'm saying, but even 23% is 23% renewable. So you're reducing the 100% fossil down to 23% of that emission. And now we want to reduce it further, right? So that's where I was going back and forth with him to say, where do you want to set the zero scale, you know, going up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a way of feeling good that 23%.
Yeah.
Something.
Well,
But
I think
20
people
I don't
should,
wanna-
because
They
they're.
don't give people the.
I don't want people
Yeah,
to feel
but-
good about 23%.
Well, the renewable portfolio standard might be pretty pathetic, but it's better than nothing. You
No.
know,
But it's been progress over the
yes,
last
it's
15
small
years. from
progress
0
over
to
15 years,
23.
yeah,
That-
And it goes up another point
Yes,
and
that's
point and a
right.
half every year.
yes.
But,
yes.
we're lagging behind. mainland
Oh, yeah, oh,
Massachusetts.
yeah. Now, we're
Or
supposed to stop at
23%.
2025 anyway. I mean, it's
With the
25%
reduction?
by 2025 and nothing has changed.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the top, that's the.
That's the maximum.
That's the-
Nothing's gonna change. There is no requirement to change it.
I bet they will change it.
It's been attempted many times and hasn't gone through.
Well, what I hear Allison saying is, when we know the rates, we could take that chart
Mhm.
and send that out in the city newsletter, in the, maybe a mailing in the bills, something like that. I love the sign idea.
Just, you know, it's, people are proud of that.
Yeah,
That's one of those
Nothing
things.
works like
people are
shame.
Very, very proud of that.
And guilt.
Mhm.
And then the equivalencies are nice with the pounds, so that, you know. So many cars off the road or trees,
Right,
you know,
right.
so there's something a little bit more, because
Mhm.
pound of carbon is so.
So many
They
trees.
kind of have
planted.
to self-identify though, that because we can't really, from
We
a
can't identify.
privacy standpoint,
No,
run a report and say, here's the customers in the city that are at 100% and reach out to them, because then
And we're
no,
gonna have posers.
but
We're gonna have some.
You know, really, it's not so much, I'm using 100% renewable energy, but I have reduced the amount of energy I use. I think that's an
right.
important
That's
point,
right.
and I think that people
Yes.
miss efficiency and how important that is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just
Amen.
about green, about what, as little green as you need. Okay,
my daughter calls those negawatts.
yes, that's right.
Um,
Which came out of a typo error at the Rocky Mountain Institute where somebody made a mistake on a manuscript. Instead of saying megawatt, they said negawatt.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, hey, wait, that sounds pretty good.
Amory Lovins folklore,
Excuse me?
Amory Lovins folklore.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. There's a lot of that.
Have you ever seen him speak?
I've met him, yeah.
Yeah. He's a crazy-
Well, up in the Rocky Mountains, they're growing bananas in his house.
I had to tour his house years ago,
did?
and there's a pet door. So we're going through, and there's, everybody's running calculations.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
Said, what about a pet door? Like, that's not insulated. But they ran the calculations, and the residual heat from the animal outweighed outweighed the infiltration. coming
Yeah.
out the pet door.
Yeah.
So it was a net.
So if any of you haven't become familiar with the Rocky Mountain Institute and Amory Lovins, it's a interesting reading. And
Well, they had a ideological and political debate in that organization. Maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where the Chinese government approached them to say, can you help us reduce our energy consumption? And some said, I don't know, the communist Chinese government wants us to help them, should we really help them? Half of the staff didn't want to do it. The other half said yes. They said, well, this is a big energy user in the world. If we want to make a big impact, we can. And to their great surprise, almost every suggestion they made was approved by the Communist Party. So
Well,
So-
we have that much luck here.
I know, much easier.
right, what's not as easy in a democracy. Other ideas for how we communicate that message? I think we got some good ones. Stephanie has a family situation or she'd be here tonight, but I know she's been thinking about it too.
You know, the sustainability committees and the forums. I mean, the sustainability committee is already talking a lot about community power. But I think at all the climate forums, this is something that, you can make sure that that information is there
Mhm.
for anybody who's coming in.
Yeah. And if we find in August that even our 100% green is still below the default. That may happen, that may not, I don't know. Who knows the future? But it seems like we can sharpen the message to, you're saving money now. And you could use some of those savings to take this much carbon a year out of Portsmouth's carbon footprint. And we need a psychologist to tell us how to make that the proper kind of nudge that people want to buy into. If there's a way to make it a positive, I'm doing this for my community as opposed to a shaming. Some way to refine that.
John, could I just ask Kevin, has any progress been made on the New Hampshire Saves issue?
I have not heard any.
Okay, because how is that supposed to work for us,
There's no changes.
Well, so normally you'd apply through the utility. Would people have to
think you
apply
still-
through us?
No, I think
No.
you still go through the
Through
utility.
your
No
mayor-
change
Yeah,
to
'cause
that.
that's.
So that, and we're not done anticipating that's going to change.
No, there's no.
Oh, okay, all right, thanks.
And that's in the FAQs as well.
Okay, thank you. Mhm.
720. We've come a long way. We've done some good work. This committee is a blue ribbon committee, meaning it's not permanent. And we've had various goals and we've met those goals. First was, is it in the best interest of the city to do community power? Yes. How should we do it? And what are our goals? We did that. Then the next step was the council said, write an energy aggregation plan. And we did that. And then implement the energy aggregation plan. And essentially we've done that. So as your chairman, I would ask, what do you think our next program's work should be? And Ben,
Is there a forecast of when there will be discretionary reserves?
Yeah, it's out a ways. I know in the technical assessment, I think to get to target joint reserves to cover operating expenses is out a few years. I believe I'd have to, it's not happening overnight.
But it's years, not
Months.
quarters.
Yeah, no, it's I can check on that. What's the latest? But I think based on the current glide path, it's out a bit. And then CPAs could tap, the coalition may tap into joint reserves to help manage rates. Because if the market is such that at a point in time that we can't offer a granite basic that's below the utilities offering for the next 6 months, there may be some tapping into the reserves to at least get the granite basic a notch below the utility at points in time, which would then delay getting to target. There's a minimum, there's a target, and there's a max. And once you get to max joint reserves, then all the reserves go into discretionary reserves.
What about, just to follow up on Allison's comment about the reduction in demand. Would those couple years, would we be waiting a number of years to do something like time of use metering? Is that something that would have to wait that long, or any kind of measures to try to reduce the consumption level, the demand level to begin with? Because there would be kind of a negative, there could be negative effect on if we buy less, we don't get a lower rate, we get a higher rate, right? But in fact, we might want to use less energy if we can do it and still get the same performance for what we want the energy for.
So that, I mean, part of what the coalition and some of this stuff I'm just not as close to, but that the utilities need to be able to support time of use rates for CPAs, but at the same time, then you need more advanced metering. And,
Right,
I
that's
think-
what I'm
I think
getting at,
Eversource
so.
is moving forward with an AMI
AMI,
program, right?
AMR is still widespread.
Right. But I think the more sophisticated AMI is on the,
Are they already
is,
on the horizon or?
I think it's an active project for Eversource across all 3 states.
Oh,
So
okay.
typically New Hampshire is always last in line for a lot of these things.
Mm.
But so,
So that would not be in the same category as waiting for many years for discretionary funding.
Well, we could use our status and our communication channels to advertise New Hampshire Saves. trying to get people to
Mhm.
get
Yeah,
involved in that program.
Absolutely.
I think there are 2 other things that would be really great if we could do. If we could start thinking about and establishing a set of criteria for when we do have reserves. So that that criteria is in place in case this committee decides not to operate next year. But also make recommendations for the next legislative session on what bills we should be looking to support as a city.
Mhm.
Anything coming forward around certain issues.
Right.
So those 2 things would kind of set us up for future,
Yep,
I think.
those are good. Yeah, for sure.
there is a regulatory and legislative committee as part of the board of CPCNH.
Right.
That and then Clifton is active in that space as well, so they're closely monitoring. And not only what's going on, but things that should be going on.
Good.
And working with Clean Energy New Hampshire. They're a compensated partner of CPCNH right now, to work with coalition on those kind of matters too.
Yeah.
The city has a legislative subcommittee too for the city council. I think one of the challenges that we have at that level is that we're not always thinking about things like energy policy. We usually are following what the New Hampshire Municipal Association recommends for the year and anything in particular related specifically to something in Portsmouth. So it would be helpful hearing from this committee, I think, for the council to hear from this committee on what we should be looking for next year
Mhm.
and approaching that legislative session, because then we have 2 bites of the apple. We have it
Yeah.
through CPCNH,
Mhm.
and then we also have the city of Portsmouth lobbying
Mhm.
separately.
One thing that we should consider, I think, and I don't know exactly how our new CEO, Brian Calnan, is planning to do it, but he's very interested in meeting with the communities, not just with the people, the so-called board members and et cetera, but yeah, I think it would be helpful to
Mhm.
have him at least zoom into one of our meetings, and we can pepper him with questions.
Mhm.
And he can also discuss his vision and et cetera. I think we'd find it helpful.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is what are our priorities that we feel as a committee Portsmouth should keep top of mind, both legislatively and in terms of future reserves with the coalition and any other electricity related and climate related areas that we can be a voice. And I think there's work to do on that.
I don't know if there's something that we could set as far as a goal to get a certain percentage of people to move from Granite Basic to one of the higher renewable energy. You know, that might be a goal to try to continue to.
Mhm.
Right.
I think we should
Track.
clearly track it and just see, hopefully
Yep.
see that line moving.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's probably pretty common that people are in it and don't even know, or You know, so the ongoing education about, did you know,
Right.
and then how easy it is to opt out, but I think it was you were saying, to go from Eversource to a third party, for some people, it's just like, you know, way too far.
Black
But
hole.
now that you're already there, they're already there, right? Now it's just choosing another option.
Right.
I think that's a whole,
Yeah.
step by step
Very
process.
works. Yeah.
We've made it easier for them to
Yeah.
choose renewable.
Yeah.
Historically, there's been a lot of fear going to a third party supplier. They thought there's
They're gonna get-
scams and they're gonna get hoodwinked.
And there were, you know.
There were,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is a safe. A safe,
So
Place.
measure and maximize our opt-ups.
And opt-ins.
For sure. Okay, that's a good list. Uh,
So the other question I have is if we don't have these, meetings once a month, do we move them out to once every other month, once a quarter? I mean, I don't know if we think we have enough to keep us going, month to month.
What do you all think about that? I'll convene as often or as seldom as you would like.
And I don't think it has to be in stone. If all of a sudden something comes
right,
up, we
right.
can meet, but
But there's
I'm
not
just
that
wondering.
much to do every
Mm.
month.
yeah, so I'm just wondering if in August we want to meet because we want to know what the new rates are, what
Right,
we're-
right.
what the
I'd say-
message is going to be. to
I would
people.
say in July, because
July.
we're gonna know the rates July 1.
Oh,
So
okay.
with that data, we can make some
Yeah.
decisions around our marketing
Yeah.
and
maybe we can
outreach,
skip
but then maybe
August,
go from
maybe.
July to September,
Yeah,
Yeah, or even October.
because I mean, I personally would like to keep track. I mean, I suppose I could go to the website, but it's just nice to understand how many communities are coming on board, when they're coming on board, what some of the
Right.
foibles have been.
I know they want to get back into some sort of outreach to all the communities that are active in terms of just like a CPCNH newsletter.
Mhm.
Here's what's going on the regulatory front, here's what's going on, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And they kind of need staff to do that. So the new
Right.
CEO is gonna be hiring probably a small team of about a half a dozen actual employees. And one of them is member engagement and communications. And he or she, I think that will be in their wheelhouse. Because, it's important, I think, to keep all the member communities reasonably on the same page in terms of what's going on. And
Right.
and it's not easy, they can't get out to talk to everybody all the time, so. That's one thing I think we'll probably see here within a few months.
Okay, so we could meet in July. Get rate reconnaissance and see what the rates hold for us. Work on how do we measure and maximize opt-ups and opt-ins? And what are our channels for that and our messaging for that? Stephanie will be back. Maybe she can have some ideas ready for us. And then longer range, our legislative priorities are our priorities around reserve use. That may be a conversation with the CEO, a Zoom meeting or something in the fall. Maybe he could. It may be too early for him to look into all that, but.
Yeah, it's almost downstream.
But I'm sure the other communities are also interested in. The future energy projects. As well.
Yeah, it's another committee they're forming, is a projects committee.
Mhm.
There's some people that are joined on the board that have a skill set in that space and operate in those arenas in their day job. And so they're looking to form a projects committee that would be kind of putting together a project strategy and how projects would be screened, et cetera, but they wanted to wait till the CEO came on board. People have been itching to create a projects committee to help start kind of how communities go about projects, how many communities kind of join together and do a project in their area, et cetera. So that's a committee it's being formed, but it's still in its infancy.
Yeah, well, that's always been part of the vision.
Right, right.
And I think the momentum will come from the communities for that.
Yeah. And I understand there needs to be some legislative change too, that they're working to make it. There's that threshold between the 5 megawatts above and below.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Ben, you were,
This is a somewhat ambitious idea, but is anyone looking at maybe the federal funding opportunities?
right.
They're out there. I just applied for 2 huge grants for the utilities,
Mm.
Mhm.
and there's a lot of money for
And then what
municipalities,
Specific municipalities.
states, tribes.
There is also some funding for this year for churches and institutions of faith who specifically targeted to them to reduce their energy use. So one of the things that's required is that that entity has to provide 1 year worth of data for all their energy use in order to qualify for grants.
Sure.
And in fact, I've been doing that for South Church now for almost a year now for that very purpose, but that's also grant money coming. But you're,
It's the city's energy advisory committee. That's something that'd be.
Mhm.
It could be a huge contribution to the.
But we identified.
identifying
opportunity.
sources. Yep.
Made a suggestion as to what it
Yep.
could be, put some resource behind it.
Mhm.
That'd be great.
Hmm.
Yeah, we should do that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Good idea. All right.
And in between meetings, if anything percolates of interest, I hear from the coalition side, I'll just drop you all an email.
Yeah.
Just,
Remember, it's one-way communication because we're a public body, so
yeah, right,
we can't deliberate.
right, right.
Yeah, blind copy us all.
Yeah.
You blind copy us all, then we can't reply all.
So so what's the right to know approach? I could send it to you and,
That's always safe. We can send it to Peter and Peter can send it to us.
Hey, send it to me and I'll send it out, and we can post it even. And I can send you a link and then everybody has access to it.
just if there's any,
Mhm.
anything that's interesting or kind of hot that's
Oh, yeah.
happening.
So when I've been sending you articles for things, that's not something that I'm supposed to be doing?
That's fine. I mean,
Oh, that's okay.
It's the dialogue.
It's the
Yeah.
dialogue.
Deliberation.
respond.
Dialogue has to be in a certain context.
So if we're going back and forth on email discussing things, that's probably.
But I can send out, like, if there was an issue last week, a billing issue that I became aware of, just so you guys are
Mhm.
Sure.
not
Yeah.
hearing it elsewhere.
Yeah.
I sent out a note and just described a particular issue that happened. I can do that to this committee. You just can't respond. Is that what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
That's why I said, if you blind copy us, we won't end up responding and
Yeah.
creating a chain of.
Because you always tell everybody, don't reply all.
Whoops.
Yes.
Well, I promised everybody we wouldn't go long tonight, because we've done so much good work. So, we'll set up a July meeting about rates and legislative priorities and messaging around maximizing opt-ups and opt-ins. And then, we should look towards the fall and finding grant money and legislative priorities and some dialogue with the coalition about reserves and projects
And an update on the net metering issue.
and an update on the pesky net metering issue.
Mhm.
Get your Eversource company in line.
See, he's gone over to the other side.
Seriously. Okay,
Thank you,
so
everybody.
Thank you.
You.